The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Kuala Lumpur International Airport's Terminal 2 on the morning of February 13, 2017. Among the crowd, a middle-aged man in glasses and a blue polo shirt approached the self-service check-in kiosks on Level 3. To fellow passengers, he looked like just another traveler catching a morning flight to Macau. His boarding pass read, Kim Chol, but his real name was Kim Jong-nam, and in less than 20 minutes, he would be dead. The estranged half-brother of North Korea's supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, had been living in exile for over a decade, a ghost from the hermit kingdom's dynastic past drifting through the casinos of Macau and the shopping centers of Singapore. Born in 1971 to Kim Jong-il's mistress, Song Hye-rim, Jong-nam had once been groomed as heir to the world's most isolated nation. Palace tutors had educated him in the arts of leadership. Party officials had whispered about his future, and for a brief shining moment, he had stood at the center of one of the world's most secretive power structures. But a single moment of weakness, a desire to visit Tokyo Disneyland with a forged passport in 2001, had sealed his fate as an outcast, transforming him from prince to pariah in a single stroke of bureaucratic discovery. Now, 16 years later, that exile was about to end in the most public and shocking way imaginable. Jong-nam had arrived in Malaysia on February 6th, spending his final week on the resort island of Langkawi, perhaps savoring what he couldn't have known would be his last taste of the freedom that exile had paradoxically provided. The man who had once been destined to rule 25 million people now lived quietly across Southeast Asia and China, his existence funded by mysterious sources and marked by the constant weight of his famous bloodline, a heritage that was both his protection and his curse. He had fathered at least 6 children, maintained a carefully cultivated low profile, and by all accounts, posed little immediate threat to anyone. The morning unfolded with deceptive normalcy. Jong-nam had checked out of his hotel, taken a taxi to the airport, and navigated the usual pre-flight routine with the practiced ease of a frequent traveler. His Air Asia flight to Macau was scheduled for 10:50 a.m., giving him plenty of time to complete check-in procedures and perhaps grab breakfast before boarding. The terminal buzzed with its typical energy, announcements echoing in multiple languages, the constant electronic beeping of security scanners and boarding pass readers. It was exactly the kind of anonymous, bustling environment where one could disappear into the crowd, which made it perfect for what was about to unfold. At 9 a.m. sharp, as Jong-nam stood at the check-in kiosk, reviewing his flight details and adjusting his glasses to read the small print on the screen, 2 women moved through the crowd with deadly purpose. Siti Aisyah, a 25-year-old Indonesian working in Malaysia's entertainment industry, approached from one direction. Duan Thi Huang, a 28-year-old Vietnamese woman with a similar background, closed in from another angle, wearing a distinctive white sweatshirt emblazoned with LOL, a detail that would later make her instantly recognizable on security footage. What happened next would be captured forever by the airport's extensive network of security cameras. A state-sponsored assassination carried out in broad daylight, witnessed by hundreds of unsuspecting travelers who had no idea they were about to observe one of the most brazen acts of international terrorism in modern history. The attack itself lasted mere seconds, but had taken months of careful orchestration. Aisyah grabbed Jong-nam from behind, her hands reaching around his shoulders while Huang pressed a cloth to his face with practiced efficiency. To anyone watching casually, it might have looked like an elaborate prank, friends surprising someone with a joke, perhaps filming content for social media. This apparent innocuousness was exactly what the women believed they were performing. They had been recruited separately over several months, trained through multiple practice runs where they smeared harmless substances like baby oil and lotion on strangers' faces in shopping malls and other public locations, earning payments ranging from $100 to $400 for each successful prank.
Dipakai hand body dan pakai baby gitu, baby oil gitu. Jadi saya rasa ya seperti biasa.
Their handlers, sophisticated operatives posing as producers from Japanese and Chinese television companies, had convinced them they were participating in a hidden camera reality show, complete with fake business cards and convincing cover stories. The women had no idea they were about to become unwitting instruments of murder. Turns out, that day, the substance on that cloth was anything but harmless. It was VX nerve agent, one of the most lethal chemical weapons ever created by human ingenuity, banned by the 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention that North Korea had conspicuously never signed. The colorless, odorless liquid attacks the human nervous system with ruthless efficiency, blocking the enzyme acetylcholinesterase and causing a cascade of catastrophic physiological failures. Pupils constrict to pinpoints, shows him staggering backward, his hands flying to his face as he begins to feel the agent's effects. His movements became increasingly erratic as dizziness overwhelmed him, his vision blurred, and panic set in. He stumbled toward airport security officers stationed nearby, gesturing frantically at his eyes and face with the desperation of someone who knows something is catastrophically wrong, but cannot articulate exactly what. "Very painful," he told the officers. The security footage captures every moment of his growing distress, him wiping his face repeatedly with his hands and shirt, unaware that he was actually spreading the lethal agent across more of his skin and potentially into his eyes and mouth. Within minutes, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Airport medical staff were called as Jong-nam collapsed in the departure lounge, his body beginning to show the classic signs of nerve agent poisoning: constricted pupils, involuntary muscle contractions, and severe respiratory distress. They rushed him toward Putrajaya Hospital in an ambulance, sirens wailing through the Malaysian morning, but medical science could do little against such a sophisticated weapon deployed with surgical precision. The heir who never ruled died en route, his body succumbing to a substance designed for battlefield use, not family disputes. Later examination would reveal the full horror of his final moments. Feces found in his underwear indicated the complete nervous system failure that VX causes, an undignified end for a man who had once been destined for supreme power. The sophistication of the attack became clear only during the subsequent investigation, revealing layers of planning that spoke to state-level resources and expertise. The VX hadn't been applied as a single compound. Instead, the women had unwittingly delivered separate, non-lethal precursor chemicals from their hands, which combined into the deadly agent only upon contact with Jong-nam's face and skin, allowing the chemicals to be smuggled through airport security undetected, while protecting the assassins from immediate death. The system required precise knowledge of chemical weapons technology, access to restricted materials, and careful training of the operatives, resources available only to nation-states or the most sophisticated terrorist organizations. When Huang vomited shortly after the attack, it was likely due to minor exposure to the residual chemicals, not guilt or nervousness as some initially speculated. Even more chilling was the discovery of Jong-nam's own preparations, suggesting he had lived with the constant awareness that this day might come. Hidden in his backpack, investigators found 12 vials of atropine, a nerve agent antidote that could have saved his life if administered quickly enough. He had carried his own potential salvation with him, a tragic irony that underscored both his awareness of the threat he faced and the speed with which the attack overwhelmed him. The presence of nearly $100,000 in cash and 4 North Korean diplomatic passports under his alias suggested ongoing connections to his homeland, or perhaps recent payments for services rendered to other parties. In a cruel twist of fate, the antidote that might have saved his life remained unused in his bag as he died just meters away, his poisoned hands unable to reach the salvation he had carried with him. As Jong-nam fought his losing battle against the nerve agent, his killers melted back into the airport crowd with practiced ease. Security cameras meticulously tracked their movements through the terminal. Aisha hurrying toward the taxi stand, her movements now urgent rather than casual. Huang, distinctive in her white LOL sweatshirt, making her way through the departure area toward ground transportation. Both women were arrested within hours as Malaysian authorities reviewed the extensive security footage, but their North Korean handlers had vanished like smoke in the wind. Their escape clearly planned and executed with military precision. 4 men identified by Malaysian police as North Korean intelligence operatives, Ri Ji-hyung, Hong Song-hak, Oh Jong-gil, and Ri Jae-nam, fled Malaysia that same day through a carefully orchestrated extraction plan. They hopscotched through Jakarta, Dubai, and Vladivostok in a matter of hours, using diplomatic channels and safe houses before disappearing behind North Korea's impenetrable border. Despite Interpol red notices and international arrest warrants, they remain free today, their successful escape highlighting the limitations of international law enforcement when confronted by state actors willing to use diplomatic resources for terrorist activities. Additional North Korean suspects emerged during the investigation, painting a picture of an extensive intelligence operation. Ri Jong-chol, a 46-year-old IT worker, was arrested but later released due to insufficient evidence, though he claimed he was the victim of a conspiracy. Other individuals included Ri Ji-yu, operating under the alias James, Kim Uk-il, an Air Koryo employee, and Hyun Kwang-song, a North Korean embassy second secretary with diplomatic immunity, who sought refuge in the North Korean embassy before being released without charges as part of a diplomatic deal. Malaysian police identified these individuals as intelligence operatives who had orchestrated the women's recruitment, provided the chemical weapons, and coordinated the attack. Clear evidence of a state-sponsored operation. The autopsy conducted at Kuala Lumpur Hospital on February 15th read like a textbook case of nerve agent poisoning, providing forensic evidence that would later prove crucial in understanding the attack's methodology. Jong-nam's organs showed extensive damage to his lungs, brain, liver, and spleen, the characteristic pattern of VX exposure. His acetylcholinesterase levels, the enzyme specifically targeted by nerve agents, had plummeted to near zero, confirming the cause of death beyond any reasonable doubt. Traces of VX were found on his face and eyes, as well as on the women's clothing, providing physical evidence of the chemical weapon's use. The forensic evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, yet North Korea's response was predictably defiant and divorced from reality. Pyongyang's reaction revealed the regime's complete disregard for international norms and evidence-based reasoning. North Korean officials insisted Jong-nam had died of a heart attack. The diplomatic crisis that followed revealed the full extent of North Korea's willingness to use coercive diplomacy to escape accountability. When Malaysia refused to release Jong-nam's body without proper identification and thorough investigation, Pyongyang effectively took the entire Malaysian embassy staff hostage, barring them from leaving North Korea in violation of international diplomatic law. The standoff continued for weeks, with North Korea demanding the body's release and the freeing of their suspects, while Malaysia insisted on following proper legal procedures and respecting the rule of law. Malaysian diplomats found themselves trapped in Pyongyang, pawns in a deadly game of international chicken that demonstrated North Korea's willingness to flout any convention to protect its interests. In the end, realpolitik trumped justice in a resolution that satisfied no one except North Korea. Jong-nam's body was returned to Pyongyang on March 31, 2017, along with his personal effects and the results of the investigation, in exchange for the safe return of Malaysian diplomats and the release of North Korean suspects who had diplomatic immunity. The deal represented a complete capitulation to North Korean pressure and established a dangerous precedent. State sponsors of terrorism could effectively take hostages to escape consequences for their actions. The trial that began in October 2017 at Shah Alam High Court exposed both the cynical manipulation of vulnerable women and the inherent challenges of prosecuting state-sponsored terrorism when the primary perpetrators remain beyond legal reach. Aisha and Huang maintained their innocence throughout the proceedings, claiming they were victims of an elaborate deception rather than willing participants in assassination. Their lawyers painted them as naive young women from poor backgrounds who had been systematically exploited by sophisticated intelligence operatives using classic recruitment and manipulation techniques. The prosecution argued they were trained assassins who knew exactly what they were doing, pointing to their calm demeanor after the attack, their attempts to wash their hands immediately afterward, and their participation in multiple practice runs. But the women's stories carried the ring of authenticity that only truth provides. They described in consistent detail being approached by men claiming to represent Japanese and Chinese entertainment companies, being paid modest sums for practice runs involving harmless substances like baby oil and lotion, and genuinely believing they were participating in a prank show that would eventually air on television. Their backgrounds, working in Malaysia's entertainment industry to send money home to support impoverished families, fit perfectly with the profile of vulnerable targets for intelligence recruitment. They were, in the most literal sense, the perfect patsies, desperate enough to participate for small payments, naive enough to believe the cover story, and foreign enough to be easily discarded if the operation went wrong. South Korea labeled the assassination part of Kim Jong-un's systematic reign of terror, designed to eliminate any potential challenges to his rule. The United States, citing specifically the use of VX nerve agent in a civilian area, relisted North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism in November 2017, a designation that carried significant economic penalties, but had limited practical impact on a country already subject to extensive sanctions. Even China, North Korea's most important ally and economic lifeline, suspended coal imports worth hundreds of millions of dollars, dealing a significant blow to Pyongyang's already struggling economy and exposing cracks in their traditionally unshakable alliance. But perhaps the most explosive revelation emerged 2 years later, when intelligence sources revealed that Jong-nam had been working as an informant for the CIA, providing American intelligence with insights into the North Korean regime's inner workings, in exchange for protection and financial support. Reports from the Wall Street Journal and confirmation from former U.S. officials revealed that Jong-nam had been meeting regularly with American agents, including in Malaysia just days before his death, sharing information about his family's regime and the dynamics of North Korean leadership. The $120,000 found in his backpack suddenly made perfect sense, not as proceeds from smuggling or family money, but as payment from his CIA handlers for services rendered. The story's final chapters played out in courtrooms and diplomatic backrooms, with outcomes that highlighted the triumph of political expediency over justice. In March 2019, charges against Aisha were suddenly and unexpectedly dropped, following intense diplomatic pressure from the Indonesian government, allowing her to return home to her family and village. Vietnamese authorities launched their own lobbying campaign for Huong, resulting in her charges being reduced to causing hurt by dangerous means, rather than murder. She was released in May 2019 after serving her reduced sentence, thanks to Vietnamese diplomatic intervention and Malaysian willingness to prioritize regional relations over criminal justice. The four main North Korean suspects, the intelligence operatives who had planned, coordinated, and executed the operation, remained at large despite Interpol notices and international arrest warrants. Their names appear on watch lists and wanted posters, but their persons remain safely beyond international law's reach, protected by North Korea's refusal to cooperate with international legal processes. The case exposed fundamental weaknesses in the international system's ability to hold rogue states accountable for terrorist activities carried out on foreign soil, using weapons of mass destruction. In September 2025, the case returned to headlines when Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim had an unexpected encounter with Kim Jong-un during China's 70th anniversary celebrations in Beijing. A photograph showing the two leaders shaking hands sparked outrage in Malaysia and internationally, with critics accusing Anwar of overlooking the 2017 assassination and the use of banned chemical weapons on Malaysian soil. The incident reignited debates about morality versus pragmatism in international relations, and raised fears about the potential normalization of relations with a regime that had never been held accountable for its terrorist activities. The man who died there on February 13, 2017, was simultaneously everything and nothing. The heir who never ruled, the exile who never found true freedom, the informant whose intelligence couldn't protect him from his own family's brutality.